And hopefully, seamlessly, you can see my presentation now.
We can see it, yes.
Perfect. Okay. I am really, really pleased to be here. So I will start by saying thank you ever so much to Andrea, to Susie, who introduced us, and to EARMA for not only hosting me today and hosting this event, but hosting the whole idea of making the invisible visible. And I think you'll tell from where my talk's going to come from today that quite a lot of the things I'll be talking about are really based in the idea that often as research managers and administrators, or research professionals is the term that we use at Glasgow, we ourselves and our role and our value within the research environment can be a little bit invisible. So quite a lot of what I have brought today to talk about kind of is about raising awareness of the absolutely essential contribution of people like us who do the kinds of jobs we do. And the other point of today is the idea that whilst we are working in people development, we're working in research culture, actually there's a great deal going very right in research culture, and it's surfacing that and really understanding what's great, what's working, and helping people to do more of that is a really key part of what I want to do, and I suppose how we want to operate at Glasgow. So if you were to scroll up to the top of the chat, you'll see that I've already shared slides with you. I know some people find it easier to follow along if they've got a copy to hand. Those slides, like everything I do, are Creative Commons, they're open access. You can share the slides with whomever you like, and you'll find that as you go along through those slides, there are things that you can click on to find out much more about the design of something, the background, the evaluation, down to sort of templates and things like that, which we're happy to share. Now, today I've got my name on the front of this slide, but this is not just my work. This is a great deal of work by a great deal of people, some of whom are here today. So if you're here from Team Glasgow or Team InFrame, or if you're one of our team member alumni who I've seen is here today as well, please do say hello in the chat and let people know that you're here as well, because I'm presenting a collective in terms of the work that I'm going to share with you today. And on that note about collective and community, what I would like to invite you to do is to try and make this, you've all taken the time out of your day to really come along and see this, be here and see this in person at the time and work with the community. So rather than taking up the whole space with just me talking to you about what we've done, what I'd like to invite you to do is, if you have a thought, if you have a reflection, if you want to share something, if you want to endorse something, or if you want to argue with something, if you like to clap back at me, please put that in the chat as we go along. Don't feel you've got to save it all to the end. So let's get that sort of community sense going as we go and as I go through the slides. I would talk for 20 minutes or so, and then we'll get into groups and actually think to ourselves, what does any of this mean for us? Is it useful? How can we use it? And what could we add to this discussion today that builds on some of these ideas? So we all go away with something exciting to think about. As always, I've got some ideas for you today. If you like them, please take them and use them. If you don't like them, feel free. No obligation. You are off the hook in terms of doing anything about it. You can forget that you were ever here. So without any further ado, I want to start with our question: what's going right in research culture? And in order to frame that, we have to go with the dominant narrative about research culture, which is that there's something going wrong with it. And in the UK and in other nationality contexts as well, there's been a great deal of effort to understand what people think of the culture they work in, whether that's early career researchers, research professionals, people from different demographic groups. What's happening in our research culture that means that we have something to address? And if we start there, then we can flip that and look the other way around. And to me, if we ask those questions, what's going wrong, they really come up with two schools of thought or two areas of influence in this emerging space that we call research culture right now. The first one is a very people-focused look at this. So if we think of all the things that probably emerged from what we would call staff development or educational development, academic development, researcher development, postgraduate development, all of these areas that have influenced how we think of people, how people are positioned, and how they relate to each other, how their careers are built and how they're developed within our research communities, we can start to think about all of the different policies, concordats, documents, strategies, national initiatives, let's say, frameworks, and action plans that have influenced this space. So if we put people at the centre, we've got our postgraduates, our research staff, our supervisors, principal investigators, research leaders, all of our academic staff. And of course, what we know about their development is that is influenced greatly by the culture in which we work. So if you're in a culture where there's a great deal of support, it's very accessible, people's attitude to development is that it's very positive, everyone should be engaging in development, the process is easy to navigate, the opportunities are plentiful, everyone has time and space and permission and encouragement to go and take up those opportunities. That looks very different than if this is framed by a culture where things aren't accessible, or they're under-resourced, the opportunities don't exist, or the attitude is dismissive or feel that this kind of activity is unimportant. So you've got all of these blue boxes in and around those people that I would say are really key parts of the work we do, not only to put on certain kinds of activities that support people to grow and develop, but to make sure that they're used, to make sure that they're effective, and to make sure that they're appropriate and relevant for the kinds of work that researchers need to be able to get done in the lives they live and in the careers that they're in right now. And we could say the same for a completely different lens on this research culture issue. So we could take a very research focused approach. So leaving the people focus behind, if we think about what research is, where it comes from, how it's done, the quality of the research, the utility of the research, the impact of the research, we can really centralize lots of different kinds of national, let's say, reports, concordats, initiatives that are intended to make the quality of the research, the accessibility of the research, the value of the research, the impact of the research as good as it can possibly be. And if we centralize that and we say we want our staff to be really thinking differently about research assessment, we want them to be really engaging with the values of open research, we want research integrity to be on the forefront of everybody's minds, then we're actually back in the same position where we're thinking about what's the culture here? Are these things known? Are people encouraged? Do they feel they have permission? Are they aware of these issues even? Are they feeling that they have the agency to get in and navigate some of these systems and processes? Are the opportunities there for people to engage with this in a way that's very easy? So actually, we're talking about one culture with different lenses on it. And whether you take, or whether you come from a background, or whether your work is centered on that very people-focused side, or the sort of research assessment, research quality side of things, actually what I feel is that we need to come together and talk about the research culture holistically, because we're really talking about very much of the same thing. Fundamentally, what we're talking about is waste in the system and reducing waste in our research systems, be that wasted talent, wasted people, wasted groups of people who are locked out from progressing in their careers. Whether that's wasted research data, research funding, whether that's experiments that can't be published because they weren't done in the right way, whether that's data sets sitting undiscoverable, we're looking at waste. And what that kind of boils down to over time is wasted goodwill within our systems, wasted time within our systems, and often wasted health and well-being within our systems. So there's some really great reasons for coming into this discussion, but for me, the people side and the process side of doing research are all functions and features of the culture that we live in. And at Glasgow, I really tried to take us on that journey of understanding that people development and process and research development, culture development are all intertwined together, and they're two sides of the same coin. And at Glasgow, we really work across multiple different teams and partners to create this cross-specialist solutions to these challenges that looks at this as a complex state that we need to think about. And if we see culture change as a process of learning and development, and development activities being underpinned by the key messages we want to emphasize and the attitudes that underpin our culture, we start to see how the two intertwine. And that's where we sit at Glasgow. We are a professional team. We are research culture and research development. We sit within research services, and we work really, really closely with our research integrity team, our research information management team and library, and actually many more across the organisation, because whilst here I've been focusing on research culture, what we'll recognise is that the research culture is actually a function of the much bigger organisational culture. And if we start here by looking on the left-hand side of this diagram at the light blue circles, you'll see they say recognition, open research, careers, research integrity, and collegiality. And they are Glasgow's research culture priorities. They're the things that my team and the teams that I work really closely with deal with. But of course, there's bigger strategies at the university, from things like the university's values and our people development strategy, the staff engagement survey that underpin everything, to specific initiatives that are intended to work on some of these trickier issues. We have a whole EDI unit. We have support services related to bullying and harassment at work. We have a staff wellbeing strategy. We have obviously our promotion, pay and reward team greatly intertwines with the work we do. So I just wanted to give you that biggest picture before narrowing down into our 5 priorities, because I really want you to be able to understand that whilst we have the 5 priorities that we have, we're not unaware and we're certainly not unlinked from these bigger organisational pieces. I actually like the fact that we separate them. I think it's something that's been of great service to the University of Glasgow in defining very research specific culture problems to work on, because if we can crystallize those down into specific actions and action plan, I think it's much easier than thinking we've got to tackle the whole world, we've got to do absolutely everything. Where do we even start with all of this? So to piece that together, as we start to move across to the right hand side of this slide, what we've done at Glasgow is establish something called the Lab for Academic Culture. And the people who sit within that lab, the lab's membership, are all the people who lead on all of those different areas and issues. So all of the people from our people and OD services who lead on promotion, pay and reward, gender-based violence, EDI, bullying and harassment, are coming to our lab as lab members. We've got the research culture and research development team, our research integrity team, research data management team, and we all meet on a quarterly basis to really look at how our research culture priorities, which underpin our research strategy, come together and coalesce into actions that we can all get on board with and we can all take part in, based in and around these identified things that we need to be able to achieve, making sure people are properly recognised, making sure the environment that we work in is one that's collegial, making sure that people get appropriate career development support, and we're engaging with research integrity and open research in the ways that we set out to do in order to make our research have as great an impact as possible. And underpinning the Lab for Academic Culture, we've got something called the Research Culture Commons, which is our university-wide open network. Anyone can join if they have an interest in the research culture and making that a better space to work. And you'll notice here that it says click the oranges to find the web pages. If you were to click this one or this one or this one, it would take you to spaces where you could read all about the formation of the lab, what the Culture Commons aims to achieve as a network, and our approach to partnerships. But I'm actually going to drill down and get away from these sort of bigger pictures of what's happening at Glasgow and really get into a couple of areas of our research culture priorities. So way back in 2019, 2020, the university defined these 5 research culture priorities, and it did so because we've read all the same reports that you've all read about what's going on within our research culture. It did so because we're signed up to certain concordats that require some of these things to be progressed, and I'm really happy to say it did so, and this is before my time, so I'll acknowledge the work that went before us and our team. It did so because this is what the people at the University of Glasgow, the 8,000 strong research ecology and research community, decided was important to them. What we don't try to do is to define research culture. I actually think people can get really tied in knots trying to define what is and isn't part of the research culture, and to say we can all have our different understandings of research culture. But what we're going to do is we're going to choose our priorities for now, and we're going to work on these for now. Those may change in the future, but here's where we are. Here's where we're focusing our efforts right now. And I want to pick up on a couple of these. So collegiality, and our statement from the university is we value those who demonstrate their respect for colleagues, have conscious care for how they lead, interact, communicate, and collaborate. And we know those basic, interactions, the way people speak to each other, the respect they show towards each other is really that foundational level of everything else that might happen across the university. If we've not got that in place, then it's very hard to build some of these more complex pieces. And also to the way we recognize quality in research and the different kinds of ways quality can be seen and understood, and also all of the different players that go into making our research the best it could possibly be. So when I say we subscribe to established frameworks such as DORA that recognize and value the different kinds of contributions that we make in our research endeavors, and we want to really embed those approaches and raise the profile and raise the visibility of the whole team approach to how we do research. And you might be thinking, hang on, we're on slide 6, and she said this is going to be about managers and administrators. Where are the research managers and administrators within this picture? Because that first slide kind of went from PGRs, postgraduate researchers, to research staff, postdocs, and then to academic staff. And actually, quite often, we'll find we can be missed out of these bigger pictures. So what EARMA refers to as research managers and administrators, at Glasgow, we refer to as research professional staff, but it means that rich picture of all the different titles and people. We're talking about the same thing. So I suppose what I'm asking, where I'm going with this is, how do we ourselves as research professionals become and be seen to be a very core and essential part of that cultural ecology, not just peripheral support people who come in when you need something and then get dropped off? How do we, when we're encouraging people to write grants, how do they acknowledge the input, the contribution, and the development needs of the whole range of people who will be taking part in this research study and supporting that, however peripheral? So I wanted to then focus down even further onto a couple of things that we've been doing at Glasgow. So our position as a team and as people who try to progress the research culture at Glasgow really is enacted through our work in the form of our commitment to inclusive development. And what I mean by that is we will support, develop, and bring into our community absolutely everybody who takes part in research. So we don't discriminate, let's say, on job title. If somebody wants to come along to a research and development workshop and they are somebody who is in a technical role or somebody who is in a teaching only role even, they can come along and they can be developed as part of that. We want to recognize the positives and really resist the deficit model. I think we speak often in terms of what we need to do, what's the action plan, what's going wrong. And I'm going to really come and tell you a lot more detail about people research in a second. Hey, can I ask if you've got your microphone on? If you could just switch it off for me so we don't get interrupted. Thank you. What we try to do is work in partnership. So especially when it comes to things like asserting our value and making sure that as research professionals we get to take part, we get parity of esteem, we get parity of credit. What we want to do is do that through a partnership approach, not a power struggle approach. And I don't know if, like me, you've read things about the academic professional power imbalance, and people often recommend a correction of that or taking back power. That's really not what we want to do. What we want to do is build this as a partnership. There's not limited power that we have to snatch, let me say. And we want to work in a way that's collaborative and that spans across the disciplines and specialisms of the very rich picture of research professional staff. So at Glasgow, there's two things that I would say have been big successes for us in the last few years. One is our research professional staff network, which takes all of our research managers and administrators across the university, brings them together with a specific action plan for their development. I'm not going to talk in detail about this, but if you were to click that bubble, it would take you to all the information you need about that. But I'm going to talk to you about something called People Make Research, which is the positive recognition campaign, which is inclusive to all research professional staff. Coming back to why did we do the campaign called People Make Research, which asked what was going right and asked people to talk about instances of collegiality at the university. So if we go back to this idea that we value people who demonstrate their respect for their colleagues, they have conscious care for how they lead, interact, communicate, and collaborate, what we were seeing straight away is that people said, oh, but I don't lead yet. Well, we'd like to, I suppose, resist the idea that you have to be in a leadership position in order to lead. We're all leading. We lead in our space, we lead ourselves, we lead laterally, we lead upwards, we manage those people around us, we lead in our areas, we perhaps lead processes. It's not about having a leadership position in terms of showing leadership. And if you look at some of the work that's being done to really understand and define what collegiality is within universities, and here's one example, instanted in the relationships that emerge within departments and in the manner in which members of the department interact with and show respect for one another, work collaboratively to achieve a common purpose and assume equitable responsibilities for the good of the unit as a whole, you'll find that often speaking about academics. So academic to academic, or academic to postgraduate researcher, or emerging new academics or academic leaders, it's very unusual to see research professional colleagues included in these kinds of definitions, though probably you're thinking the same thing as me. Every single thing in that definition absolutely applies to research professionals as well. We can see ourselves in that, in how we show respect, how we interact, how we work collaboratively, and how we assume equitable responsibilities for the good of the unit as a whole. Whether we feel we receive these back, whether we feel we are equitably acknowledged or respected on the same grounds as other people, might vary depending on where we are, even within one university, let alone across. But I think there's probably something to say that really applies to us as research professionals in this space. So thinking then back to this idea of collegiality, how do we get more of it? How do we encourage it? Where does it come from? How do we know who's already got it? And how do we instill and embed and grow our collegial approach? And at the same time, this idea of who can be collegial, who can be recognized, who can take up space within the research environment and the research culture. And we really start to think about that. Of course, in the middle, and I wouldn't want to not acknowledge this, of course, parity of career and promotion pathways really matter. And I know that we live at a time where we don't have that, where actually research professionals are often left behind when it comes to very distinct career pathways or promotion opportunities. And that's why people and organizations like EARMA, and in the UK, EARMA, and probably Encura also thinking about this in the USA and the Australian equivalents as well, really thinking about what does it look like to have a career, to build a career, to professionalize in this area. And some places are way, way ahead of the UK in terms of how career and professionalization is understood, and some places are way behind, and we all exist within that tension. And I do want to acknowledge that that's important, but while we wait for that to happen, while we put our efforts into making that change, I think there are things that we can do on the local level as well that support us to become more collegial across all these different roles, and to become more recognized for the work we do and the value we bring within the university. And there's three ways I would say we do this at Glasgow. And the first one is to set up new structures and raise awareness of the need to be collegial. And speaking specifically for research managers and administrators, I am thinking of mentoring programs, of the networks and communities that we build, of the development activities that we run through those networks and communities, and of things like job secondments, shadowing opportunities, all of the kinds of things that you'll be familiar with that are specifically aimed at supporting research professional staff, research managers and administrators, Absolutely, those are important. And I think that's where lots of our first instinct lies. We kind of gravitate towards what can we do for this group of people? What we can do, and I think it's a really important place to work kind of in this middle space, is that we can hack into existing structures that I think we've been quite traditionally locked out of. So having research professionals, research managers and administrators more in a more balanced way on funding panels or appointment committees, taking part in peer review and really getting into those spaces and sharing their expertise to create more diversity of opinion, background, understanding, and knowledges within those spaces that we share within our universities and externally. And I think there's things we can do as well in order to make sure that we aren't creating an us and them environment. Like, for example, I think it works really, really well if we have mentoring programs that pair senior professionals and senior academic staff with each other and really try and bring those two different sets of complementary knowledges together within a mentoring program or within a leadership development program. You know, I think often we're inclined to say this is for senior professionals and this is for senior academics, but really good things happen and relationships build, knowledge is shared when we put people in the same space together. So creating visibility of each other and creating that esteem, getting to know people as people, I think is important work that we are trying to do at Glasgow as well. And I'll finally come to the thing that I'm actually here to talk about, is actually celebrate what matters. Across all the different role types, there are things we have in common. There are certain behaviours that underpin our collegiality and our leadership that matter to the people around us. And we can really work from the bottom up rather than imposing a top-down model saying everybody must be like this or this is what a good leader looks like. We can actually work from the bottom up and ask people right across that research ecology, what matters to you? Who's doing a great job? Who is creating a positive research culture? Who has that conscious care for how they interact with others? And what does that look like in practice? And we know that the people who lead research in all of these different ways are not only important in what they do in terms of their managing down, but they are the research culture. The way they interact, the conversations they have, the kinds of relationships they build is what creates our culture. Leaders are the people who either offer opportunities or keep them to themselves, who share resources or find resources for others, who connect people together and build their community, or they don't. And actually, it's a really important space to look at this as a shared endeavour between everyone taking part in the research. For me, research recognition is not just about the output and who collaborated to create the output, but who collaborates to create the culture that we work in and who is enabling others to be effective and supported within the environment. Let me tell you where the idea of people make research came from. So Glasgow, where I work, the city of Glasgow has a slogan for the whole city. Glasgow really prides itself on being a very friendly city and having a great culture, being very welcoming, very supportive, very generous, very collegial. And our city slogan is people make Glasgow, and it's on this huge building as you come into the city. It's the first thing you can see, people make Glasgow. So we borrowed from that and we said, actually, within Glasgow, people make research. The research culture, the research environment, the research quality is what it is because of the people who are doing this work. And People Make Research, therefore, is a project that just reaches out to ask everybody across all career types, all stages, all roles, all relationships, who is doing a good job, who is creating this positive culture. And we ask people to just put in small 100-word testimonials to say, you know, they name the person, they say, this is what they do, and this is the impact that it has on me. And every single person within that research environment can be recognized. It's not competitive. We don't do shortlists. We don't do awards. We just make sure that every person who is named and nominated gets a thank you from our vice principal for research and knowledge exchange. And their names go up on a board with the example of their testimonial. And we share that. We promote it. We say, we want more of this. This is what it takes to be a good research leader at Glasgow. We want this to happen more and we want people to be recognised for it. And I've pulled here just a few examples. We've currently got our campaign open right now for 2025, and there's 250 different examples. So from PhD students, postdocs have been nominated, academics have been nominated, and tons of research professionals have been nominated for doing a great job and for leading in a way that supports a thriving culture. So for example, when a collaborative, complex project with funding from the British Academy was initiated, Angela stepped up to lead us successfully, presented challenges and unexpected complexity, and Angela took that in hand for us, advising, guiding, and ensuring that we could do what we needed to deliver. She kept in touch to keep us informed, reduced uncertainty, and built trust. We couldn't have done it without her expertise and resilience. So I think there's a shining example there. David's confidence and drive has led to many opportunities for cross-collaboration across resources via internal and external opportunities. On several occasions, I've noticed he has excellent knowledge about projects which exist across all of the schools and is extremely good at putting the right people in touch for collaborations. Rosemary's authenticity, open-mindedness, creativity, and sharing of knowledge, combined with inclusivity and readiness to try new things, creates a space for people to step out of their comfort zones. He puts people first, bringing people together across the university to learn from each other, making time to connect people, encourage new approaches across the research ecosystem, and creating spaces for people to grow. Thank you, you make a positive difference to the working day. So we can see here, not only are people emphatic about this, it creates a great deal of goodwill from the people who write the nominations, from the people who then receive this text that somebody's written about them. And just overall, it creates a great sense of collegiality in and of itself. Now, the two links that I put there are just our short reflections within our team blog on the process and what worked and what didn't. But importantly, if you go to those and you click through, you'd be able to find every single piece of data that we've received, because we put it all openly onto Padlets and we share that really widely across the university. And that has great advantages, actually, because this is the kind of thing that maybe people wouldn't mention. They might think, but they wouldn't mention unless we gave them that channel to do that. Actually, if people are thinking, I'm not nominated, I wonder what people did who got nominated, they might get some ideas here. And whilst I've included these examples from research professionals, this clearly also applies to all of our academic staff, our senior leaders, from PhD all the way through to professor. Now, just yesterday, because I wanted to give you something that was a bit more crystallized to start thinking about, I just did a very, very preliminary, very quick and dirty analysis of the themes of our research professional staff who were nominated. What do they do that makes a positive difference to our research culture? Because I know who the audience is today, and I thought you would be interested to hear. People value us when we are proactive. So if we have an inclination to action, if we are very visibly in our areas and in charge of that area, so that we take positive action in order to own a particular space. Okay. Really interestingly, the words often are associated with communication are things like explain, translate, scaffold. So this real sense that there is something really complex that needs the layer of translation in order for people to be able to understand it really speaks to the different types of expertise that we hold and our ability to communicate that in simplified terms for the people who need to be able to understand. And then thinking really in terms of our ability to collaborate and connect with others, you know, how we reach out within our networks to get a heads up or get intel or insights about what's coming on the horizon, the way we belong to our networks and how we utilize and bring that value into our work. And then our expertise, what we're known for within our networks, and the esteem that we hold within our network seems to be very important to people. So this is not a detailed analysis. I wouldn't publish this. This is just my preliminary scanning of why people think research professionals are important in the research environment, and the types of valued contribution that we bring to the research that gets done. And again, this might feel very obvious to us sitting here, knowing that this is the kind of value that we add. But I think we have to ask the question. We have to ask the question, what do people do and why is that valuable, in order to get people to reflect and realize why people like us are very important within universities. And, you know, when we see things published that, you know, there's way too many administrators, we could have bought a lot more academics for that, what a waste of money. When we see these narratives still existing, I think we do need to work really hard to unpick what's going on and to really show that value that we add. So kind of wrapping this down into the impact that this project has had. Yes, we collected the 100-word testimonials. So we got all of that data that we could do content analysis of and understand the different kinds of value different groups bring to our research culture. We got to look at the engagement data. So we got to see who did the work of nomination. So we know who got nominated, but actually who spends time writing these nominations. You might have some ideas just forming in your mind as I'm speaking. Women is who writes these nominations. So in terms of who gets nominated, it's about 50-50 in terms of gender. Who does the writing, who does the work of making sure people are recognised has a female bias. So that's an interesting one for us to be aware of. And we get to see across our university, are there collegiality hotspots? Are there specific schools, departments, teams, for example, where they're really getting collegiality right? And what can we learn from those areas? It's allowed us to send thank you emails, and please don't underestimate the value of getting an email from somebody to say, you've done a great job, it's really important, thank you. It's not everything, you know, I'd like to be promoted as well, but it's certainly something more than nothing in terms of creating a culture of recognition and goodwill. And it gives people evidence if they want to include it in their annual appraisal, perhaps in their promotion. As I mentioned before, it creates a visibility of positive practice. So if people haven't taken part and don't really know how to take part, but might want to just have a read through all those examples and understand what makes a positive impact, you know, people who are perhaps getting into their leadership journey, people who recognize that their approach isn't working and want some ideas for what to do instead, can really help. And that thematic analysis of what matters to people. And in terms of creating change, the impact of this, to challenge the awards model, I think at a time when we've got extreme competitiveness within our research environments, the last thing we need is people competing for research culture awards. You know, if you're doing a good job, you should be named as someone who's doing a good job. You shouldn't have to win something in order to have that recognition. It's helped us to create and underpin a leadership development framework for our staff across all the different areas and people who contribute to research. It's helped us to really look specifically at the value of research professional staff, and it's informed the In-Frame project, which I'll just end with in a minute before I hand over to you for your discussions. Just to say, if you're interested in running a similar campaign like this, I can give you everything. So I can give you the emails we send, the documents, the people fill in, the templates, and just basically tell you how to do this. And we're about to see in the next few weeks, 2 more universities have adopted this and are going to run it because they are our partners in the In-Frame project. So the In-Frame project is Glasgow, University of St Andrews in Scotland and the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, working together under this Wellcome funded project that is looking to build a collegial leadership framework across the research piece that recognises all the different players, that recognises all forms of leadership, and really starts from this kind of campaign where we're learning from what's happening at the grassroots level, and then uses our £1.2 million Research Culture Catalyst Fund to democratise that, to actually ask people, what don't we know? How would you enhance our framework? And has seeded, and always about to, lots of different projects across the 3 universities looking at collegiality and leadership within our research culture. Alongside that, the University of Edinburgh is leading on the idea of our community knowledge hub. Where does all of this knowledge go? How do we embed this into things like recruitment? How do we embed this into internal demand management funding calls? How do we embed this into how we operate with our local communities in our research impact work? How do we make sure that this is embedded into promotion schemes, for example? So it's only a 2-year project. We'll only be able to start something within that 2 years, and we're hoping it will have legacy after that. But I just wanted to walk you through that sort of biggest picture from why we're doing research culture work, through what the priorities are, and then taking a deep dive into 2 of those priorities, collegiality and recognition, from that research professional lens, and then bring you through the People Make Research project to look at what we found and how that's having impact within our university. Now, there's lots of things, very, very big and very, very small within that. So I would invite you to extract something from that was meaningful to you, perhaps an idea, perhaps something that you want to try, perhaps something that you definitely wouldn't do, that wouldn't work where you are. And as we go for 10 minutes into breakout rooms, just start thinking, what could you do, large or small, to champion and recognise research professional staff and the value they bring. And some of you will already be doing this, and please do share your own work within your groups. Now, just before we pop into those groups, I have, one second, a Padlet that I would like to put into the chat. Let me get rid of this.
I have already shared the link to the Padlet.
You did. Thank you ever so much. If you click on that and you wanted to capture some of this, it would be good for our community to start building more ideas in a way that we can all benefit from and share. So that's there if you've got time. But the main objective is enjoy your 10-minute conversation, share ideas and support each other. And I'll see you in 10 minutes.